Hey guys, back again with another video. The Game of the Year video that I like to do every year. It's always one of my favorite videos to do. And yeah, I don't really want to talk too much in the beginning here. As usual, I'll do the top 10 first. I guess general thoughts about this year though. 2017 has been an incredibly strong year for video games. A lot of people are calling it like one of the best years for video games. I don't know if I'd go that far, but it's certainly the best year for video games in a long time, at least from what I can remember. Like, it's crazy. I could have easily done a top 20 list. That's how good this year's been. But I decided to cut it down to 10, so there's going to be some notable omissions for a lot of people. Like with other years, I couldn't play everything I wanted to, so after the top 10, I'm going to talk about games I missed that I would have liked to play, and then kind of like my dishonorable mentions. Honorable mentions as well, and then like games I thought were disappointing or not very good. A much better track record for games than last year as far as like clunkers for me. There's only really one game I played this year that I outright hated. The rest of them were just kind of mediocre, and I didn't end up sticking with them. But yeah, that should tell you how strong this year is. Although, granted, there's a lot of shitty games that I didn't bother with, like Mass Effect Andromeda, Star Wars Battlefront 2. Like, there's a bunch of these like really shitty games that I didn't play because they just, you know, I'm just not going to play them. But yeah, with that said, let's get started with number 10. At number 10 is Tales of Berseria. This game came out early in the year, and it ends up being one of my favorite Tales games. I've always been a huge fan of this series, and yeah, this game really impressed me with its cast of characters and storyline, a lot darker than previous Tales games, and you almost play anti-heroes in a way. And just the dynamic between the characters I thought was really fascinating and well done. The battle system is perhaps not my favorite in the series, but I still did really enjoy it. And it was just a blast to play, really, from start to finish. I mean, I am getting a little tired of their engine. I think they really need to update the engine. The environments in this game look horrendous. The character models still look nice enough, but man, the dungeons in this game were incredibly bland. And just, yeah, it's not a looker, that's for sure. But yeah, it's definitely one of the best Tales games in a very long time, and it's a huge improvement over Tales of Zestiria, which was really underwhelming in a lot of ways. So I'm glad they rebounded from that, and I think I think there's a good future for the Tales series. I think the next Tales games could be something really special, because I think this game it's got one of the best storylines in the series by far, I think, actually. Yeah, definitely one of the best games of the year for me. It really surprised me. A nice return to the form for the series. At number 9 is Horizon Zero Dawn, and this game really surprised me because I've never been a huge fan of guerrilla games. I've hated the Killzone games. I've always found those games to play like garbage, but this one I really enjoyed. You know, it's not the most like original game, but it's got really dynamic combat with some like satisfying bow and arrow action, some great unique enemy types in this one, and a relatively interesting sci-fi storyline. The writing isn't the greatest in this game, and it starts out a little slow, but by the end I really did enjoy the characters and where the story went. It was surprisingly good, I thought. And then, of course, the game is absolutely breathtaking. One of the best looking games from a technical aspect. Just absolutely terrific. I'm still kind of blown away by how this game looks. Yeah, I don't know, I was kind of engaged with this game pretty much from the get-go all the way up until the end. I even liked a lot of the side content, even though I thought the side quests were nowhere near as interesting as like the main storyline. I really love the size of the world in this game as well. It's not too big and it's not too small. It's just the right size for me. And I liked a lot of the RPG elements as well, the crafting, the skill trees. I mean, you know, it's the kind of stuff you've seen in a lot of other games, but I thought it was handled well in this game. And I don't know, it was just a solid game that really kind of impressed me. I think it's maybe a little overrated. I don't think it's as amazing as a lot of people think it is. but it still ends up being one of my favorite games of the year.
You did it!
At number 8 is Xenoblade Chronicles 2, the last game I played this year. I haven't done a review on this one yet. I actually just finished it not too long ago. It took me 75 hours. It's quite a beast of a game. Now, a lot of people I know have said this is their favorite JRPG of all time. And I know quite a few other people that call it like a masterpiece, you know, and like the top game of the year. I wouldn't go that far. I didn't like it that much. I think there's a lot of problems with this game, a lot of things that really annoy me. And while I wouldn't say Xenoblade Chronicles X is a better game, I still prefer it. I feel like the exploration in that game was far better, and the environments I much preferred, and the actual just like mechanics of it. Even though the battle system in this game is a lot better. The battle system is, I think, the standout of this game, actually. It's this really in-depth battle system. The elemental burst system is really cool. There's all sorts of cool strategies to this game. I love a lot of like the character customization in this game as well. The exploration is still top-notch, especially compared to a lot of other JRPGs. And just, it's a breathtaking game. Like, the environments are just absolutely amazing to look at in this game. A lot of cool enemy designs as well. The story is okay. I think this is one of the things that's a little overpraised with this game. The characters are likable, although honestly I much prefer Nia to Pyra and Mithra. I don't know why everyone is so obsessed with those characters. I even think Nia is a better match for Rex. I don't know, I think she's actually a really good character, like one of my favorite characters in an RPG in quite some time. But yeah, I don't know, there are things that bug me about this game. There's a lot of quality of life things that just annoy me to no end. The map system until a recent update was just horrendous. The game's pathfinding is just horrible. Like, I got lost so many times in this game, and I just like, the side quests are not very engaging. They're mostly boring fetch quests. Like, the blade system is cool, but like the gacha system is kind of frustrating, where it just takes forever to open core crystals, to the point where towards the end of the game I had like 60 of them, and I just didn't want to open them because it took forever. But anyways, this is all stuff for review. For the most part, I really did enjoy this game. I was completely addicted to it. It's one of those games that I just couldn't put down. And the combat system is very satisfying. It just never gets old. And it's really awesome with some of like the boss fights, and it's really flashy too. Really did enjoy the battle system and just the general exploration in this game, and the story is good enough. And I do think it's cool that they went back to like a story focus for this one, as opposed to Xenoblade X, which was definitely more exploration focused. But a part of me does still prefer that. But I do feel like this game is maybe, like, the mainstream critics aren't really talking about it as far as Game of the Year goes. It's one of those games that, like, it's a December game. People tend to not consider December games for Game of the Year, which has been unfortunate, because I do think this is able to stand among some of the more higher profile games of this year. At number 7 is Metroid Samus Returns, a Mercury Steam game making my Game of the Year list. How crazy is that? I've always hated their games, but I gotta say, I'm impressed with what they did with this remake. A lot of cool forward-thinking ideas with this game. The free aim is just absolutely a game changer for side-scrolling Metroid. I really love the melee counter and what it adds to combat. And, you know, I don't mind the more action-oriented approach that this game has, especially when it comes to the boss battles, which are spectacular, challenging without being frustrating, that really require you to use your entire arsenal, which I really enjoyed. And it's got all the hallmarks of a great Metroid game, the rewarding exploration, you know, the backtracking as well, though the structure of the game, they didn't change it too much, so it's still one of the more linear Metroid games, but I didn't mind so much. And I think this is different enough that it's not like better or worse than another Metroid remake. I don't know, I feel like people aren't really talking about this game with in terms of like Game of the Year lists. It's probably because it's a 3DS game. For whatever reason, I feel like people, especially like mainstream critics, like don't tend to include handheld games in Game of the Year talks. which is unfortunate, because, I don't know, just because it's on a handheld doesn't make it any less worthy of discussion than, like, a lot of other games. I don't know, to me, this is easily one of the best games of the year, and I'm just so glad that we finally got another Metroid game, and that it turned out to be as good as it is. And at number 6 is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and a lot of you will probably be surprised at this, that it actually ranks decently high on my list, because in my review, you'll probably remember I wasn't super high on this game. And I think that's just simply because it's often considered one of the greatest games ever made already. And this is definitely going to be the game that's going to be on number 1 on most people's Game of the Year lists. It seems to be generally considered like the best game of the year overall. And a lot of people are calling it like this perfect game, this masterpiece of a game. And I just can't agree. I think there's just too many problems with this game. Although a lot of it is, I will admit, a lot of it is just what I really want or expect from a Zelda game. I mean, what I've always loved about previous Zelda games, the 3D ones, are the dungeon designs, the clever dungeon designs with really engaging, smart puzzles and bosses, like varied bosses with all these interesting patterns. And Breath of the Wild has none of that. The dungeons in Breath of the Wild, they flat out suck. They all feel very similar to one another. They're incredibly short, and they've got the open-ended structure I just didn't really care for. The bosses are incredibly lazy. You just take all your weapons and just keep whacking them until they're dead. There's like no strategy or patterns to them at all. I mean, they have different moves, but it's just like dodge out of the way. The combat system in this game, I think, is a step down from Twilight Princess, actually, which is crazy. And like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I think the shrines, the massive amount of shrines, is a good substitute for the traditional Zelda dungeon. You know, some of these shrines are well designed with cool puzzles, but I mean, come on, 30% of them are combat shrines. Like, anytime I would enter a combat shrine and it said major test of strength, I was just like, oh, are you fucking serious again? I mean, I can't be too hard on this game, and it ranks high for me because I look at all the games that have come out this year, and you know what? Even with my problems with this game, this is still one of the best games of the year. It's still one of the best Zelda games, I think. The world here is just spectacular. The exploration is so rewarding. There's so many fun things to do. So many cool little interactions and secrets. It's an open world game that doesn't feel like completely bloated with boring shit, other than some of the shrines. And I was so addicted to this game. I was so enthralled with it. It's the kind of game I would play for like 8 hours straight. Like, it was absolutely insane. And it's just, I don't know, it's a fun game. I won't lie, it's fun, and it takes risks. It messes with the traditional Zelda formula in some interesting ways. And I actually like the cooking system in this game a lot too, actually, now that I look at the footage here. I don't know, I feel like there's still room for improvement, though. This is a good stepping stone for a Zelda game that will be a masterpiece. I'm just imagining a game with like the amazing world that this has, but with Majora's Mask style storytelling and side quests and tone as well, because the story in this game sucks too. Although Zelda has never been an amazing series for storytelling exactly. And then adding like the traditional Zelda dungeons with the amazing puzzles. I know Skyward Sword gets a lot of shit, but I mean, the first dungeon in that game is better than any of the dungeons in this game. But yeah, I can't be too hard on this game. I do think it's a phenomenal game. I think it's well worth your time. It's the kind of game you'll just lose yourself in. It's very immersive in that way. And I'd even argue is probably worth owning a Switch for. I just hope Nintendo doesn't look at all the glowing praise for this game and think they created this perfect masterpiece, and that there is no room of improvement for the next one. Because there is. I hope they don't, I don't know, just make another game very similar to this without making like barely any improvements, because, yeah, I don't know, I think this game is actually quite flawed. But yeah, it's still definitely good enough to make my Game of the Year list, and I won't deny the fun I had and the sense of wonder that this game really gave me in the end. At number 5 is Cuphead, and I mean, you have to first, of course, mention the amazing visuals for this game. They went for a style, and they 100% nailed it. One of the best looking games I've ever played. It's absolutely amazing to look at. But the game is actually also a ton of fun to play. It's this nice retro throwback to run-and-gun shooters like Gunstar Heroes, Contra, Mega Man. This style of game I grew up with and still love to this day. This game has amazingly tight controls, absolutely spectacular boss fights that are all so different from one another, and has all sorts of interesting patterns that you have to avoid. The game is super challenging. You'll die a lot, but it's never frustrating because when you die, you don't have to redo a lot of shit. These boss battles are 2 minutes long at most, and even the running gun levels are short as well. I like a lot of the different abilities that you'll get when you get coins throughout the level, so there's a little bit of customization, which I definitely appreciated. And yeah, it's just one of those games where I love games like this where they're able to be challenging without being frustrating because they have a lot of modern design sensibilities. You know, if this was a game in the 80s or the 90s, it would have a live system, and you'd have to end up redoing a lot of bosses once you get game overs, and that's the kind of shit that I'm glad is gone. So you have a game like Cuphead that is super challenging. I died over like 300 times, but I always wanted to try again, and it was always fun to try again. It plays so well. You know, it's not like this, you know, this groundbreaking game, but I gotta say, it is kind of shocking how amazing it turned out to be. It's not just the visual style. You know, I think a lot of people might have been worried that this game would have been just, you know, all style, no substance, but turns out the game itself is really fucking good. Definitely one of my favorite games of the year, and definitely one of the more memorable games of the year. And I really can't wait to see what these guys do next. It's actually a Canadian team, which is really cool as well. Cuphead is just awesome. At number 4 is Hollow Knight. Man, this game was absolutely amazing. It's one of the few games this year that really blew me away in one way. It's got some issues. The boss fights, I think, are way too long. They have way too much health. They're well designed. They're fun to fight. I don't know. To me, they just had way too much health. And it kind of made the game a little bit of a pain in the ass at times. It also uses the Dark Souls style death system where every time you die at a boss, you have to do like this trek to the boss again before you get to fight him, which makes it even more frustrating, and I'm not sure it works well. I'm a little more mixed on it in a Metroidvania type game like this, but this game's strengths ultimately won me over and made it rank really high for me. This has some of the best world design I've ever seen in a game, flat out. The way these areas are interconnected is absolutely brilliant. There's one moment in this game where I actually sat there, dropped the controller, and just like said, wow. I was actually just blown away. It also is the closest to Dark Souls in the way that NPCs are very mysterious, and the further you get into the game, different things happen with different NPCs depending on different interactions you have. There's so much optional content in this game, it's absolutely staggering. You could end up finishing this game in like 15 hours, but it would take 40 hours to see everything. And the developers aren't afraid to hide things from you. They don't expect you to see everything your first playthrough. They're not afraid to hide like entire areas completely like in well-hidden spots, similar to like the Souls games. The combat has a surprising amount of depth to it as well. I thought it was quite enjoyable. It's got a cool customization system with the charms where you can actually kind of build your character for different situations. The health system is really cool too, where you're kind of gathering like soul basically, and then you can kind of heal at any time, but you'll consume some of that resource. It was just a really intriguing world, and the atmosphere in this game is absolutely incredible. especially due to the music. The music is so moody, and it just really sticks with you. Yeah, I was just completely enamored with this game. I could not put it down, and the world design was just consistently amazing me. It's weird too, because I didn't like this game that much at first, but the more you play it, the more its hooks get into you, and you start to get new abilities, and traversal becomes easier, and the world starts to open up, and then it just, I don't know, it just kind of snowballs like that, and it just gets better and better. I don't know, man, it reminded me of playing Dark Souls for the first time. Like, I feel like, even though this is a 2D side-scrolling Metroidvania, it's the closest a game has come to succeeding at the Souls game's strengths. You know, that sense of mystery, that world design. And it's funny, Salt Sanctuary was my game of the year it came out, but this game, I think this game's much better than that, actually. Yeah, definitely. It's a shame, you know, this game is, I think, getting overlooked as far as, like, Game of the Year goes, because it's only on PC, which is unfortunate, and I think a lot of people aren't playing it because of that. And I really hope the upcoming Switch release is going to get more people to jump on this, because, man, I think this is just an absolute must-play. Just terrific. Absolutely terrific game. And at number 3 is Nier Automata, and man, do I love this game. It came out fairly early in the year, a Yoko Taro game, and this is his first game with actual good gameplay, or at least, like, really good gameplay. Like, I kind of enjoyed Nier, but it was definitely, like, a flawed gem. With the help of Platinum Games, though, now we have this game that is extremely fun to play with a great combat system. Now, it's not as in-depth as some other games from Platinum, like, certainly not on the level of, like, Bayonetta or something, but I still do really enjoy, like, the flashy combat in this game, and I love the way it's blended with shoot-'em-up elements, like, shooting elements in general, and the transitions between the different combat styles are so spectacular. And I just love the way they're handled. The game also has some really great RPG elements. It's definitely an RPG, so it stays true to the original Nier in that way. I love the customization in this game. The chip system is very cool. It rewards experimentation, and you can really create your own builds, basically, with it. And I found a way to, like, pretty much, like, break the game, which I thought was pretty cool. You have this very bleak world. Of course, being a Yoko Taro game, the story is extremely fucked up, but at the same time, actually ends up being one of his most hopeful stories. It's got a lot of thematic depth to it. The characters are fascinating, and there's so many memorable moments in this game. And this is one of my favorite types of games as far as its narrative goes, because this is this type of story that can only be done in the video game medium. It can't be done as a book, it can't be done as a movie, and the way endings are handled in this game is really fascinating. And to me, this game hands down has the best narrative in a game this year. I absolutely loved it. And yeah, it's, you know, the world is really interesting as well. The music, man, how can we not mention the music? Ugh, definitely the best soundtrack this year. Absolutely beautiful, but at the same time, it's eclectic with many different, like, many different styles of music that you'll hear. A couple of the songs in the soundtrack are some of the best video game music I've ever heard. Man, it's, like, absolutely loved this game. The only thing about it that really I didn't care for all that much were most of the side quests. They were kind of your typical fetch quests, so they weren't that interesting, but there are a couple hidden ones that are really cool and well worth your time. It's just a little tough to find them, and then to know which side quests are going to ultimately be the good ones. But yeah, no, this game was super memorable for me, and it was just such a huge improvement over the original Nier, which I already liked quite a bit. But this game really steps it up. I think the cast of characters is probably the only thing I might prefer in the original Nier. I think they're a little more memorable, but I can understand why. There's kind of a reason for that compared to this game. But yeah, this game also ends up being just one of the most unique games. There is nothing else like this game. this year. It's it's crazy, it's weird, it's doing things differently, and in an industry where everything just feels the same. I admire that, I really do. So. And I'm glad Yoko Taro finally has a success on his hands. This game is done quite well commercially, so we'll get to see more good stuff from him. And yeah, very exciting, a very exciting future for him, I'm sure. And yeah, this is hands down one of my favorite games of this year.
This is the place.
And at number 2 is Super Mario Odyssey. The most fun I've had playing a game this year. Pure joy from start to finish. This game, I had the biggest grin on my face the entire time. And it's a type of game we haven't gotten for a while, at least for Mario. An exploration-focused 3D Mario game. I mean, the Galaxy games were kind of like Mario 64 in a way, but the scope of the environments was far more limited, and those games were a lot more linear. Whereas this, it's really rewarding to just explore these amazing environments. The music in this game is super catchy. There's so many interesting challenges. The game is, in typical Nintendo fashion, it's constantly throwing new ideas and new concepts at you. And the way it builds upon these concepts is just genius. And I gotta say, for how many moons there are in this game, it's remarkable how many high quality, I mean, maybe a few of them are lazy, but they're never frustrating. I think there's maybe like 10 out of like the over 800 moons I got in this game that I thought were frustrating. Like the jump rope mini game and the volleyball one just sucked, but almost everything else was fun. Like the look of this game I really love. Just it's so vibrant, it's so colorful. The festival part of this game is one of the most memorable moments in gaming for me. Like with that Hollow Knight, one of the moments in Hollow Knight, it's, again, I just put the controller down and I was just smiling, and it was just such a joyous part of the game, in a game that's already just giving you pure joy. And I almost 100%ed this game. I almost got every single moon in this game. I just could not put it down. When I feel like I want to 100% a game, that's a sign of true quality to me, because I feel so many games I just don't want to bother with a lot of the optional stuff, whereas this game has a really strong post-game to it, and it's where the game really gets challenging. The very last level is tough. It took me multiple tries to get it done, but it was super satisfying when I did. Man, did I love this game. It's weird. I think a lot of people are going to put Zelda over this game, but to me, like, this is just what I want from 3D Mario, and it just completely delivered for me. And finally, at number 1, Persona 5. The game I was most excited for this year, and I'm glad to say it completely lived up to my expectations. And ultimately ends up being one of my favorite RPGs of all time, and certainly my favorite game that I played this year. This is the complete package for me. I love pretty much everything about this game. The storyline that's darker in tone compared to Persona 4, a lot of the themes that it tackles, the cast of characters. The Persona games are so good with character development. You spend every day with these characters, and then you always get that bittersweet ending where you feel like man, the endings for Persona games are always so good, and this game's no different. The great structure to the game where you're balancing school life and dungeons, and as well as your social links. There's always something to be working towards, which it keeps the game from being being addictive. Like it's one of those games that just, when you get sick of the school life, you do the dungeons. You get sick of the dungeons, you do the school life. It's like this endless gameplay loop that is just so satisfying. The press-turn battle system that I love so much is one of my favorite turn-based battle systems in RPGs, and it's just as involving and fun as in previous games here. The Persona fusing is addictive as always. You have obviously the classic Velvet Room that I love so much. The voice acting is top notch. The writing is quite good. The localization's gotten some mixed opinions, but honestly, I think it's overblown, the criticism for it. especially when you start comparing it to something like Ys 8. Yeah, the dungeons, man. Like, the dungeons were always kind of a weakness of the previous Persona games, the randomly generated dungeons. So not only are the dungeons in this game a huge improvement over the previous games, this game has the best dungeons in any JRPG I've ever played. Dungeons have always typically been kind of bad in RPGs. And man, the dungeons are so involved in this game with some really cool puzzles. Each dungeon has like its very own theme and setting to it, and the way these dungeons tie into the story is just fascinating. There's like a bunch of fun mini games that you can do. The amount of content in this game is insane. 105 hours it took me to finish this game, and I was never bored. It was always exciting. Plenty of cool plot twists as well. And man, even characters that you kind of hate at first, you grow to love by the end. A lot of interesting developments with these characters. The style. How can I not mention the style of this game? It is one of the most stylish games ever made. The UI, the character designs, the transitions. Man, like the music. The music's great too. It's maybe a little underwhelming compared to like Persona 4 and 3, which I think have some of the best soundtracks of all time. I think it was a lot to live up to, and I don't think the soundtrack quite matches the high quality or the high bar that those ones did, but it's still really, really good and really fits this the style of the game. I could just talk all day about this game. I have the review up on the channel, but yeah, it's the complete package for me. There's very little about this game that I dislike. And yeah, it would definitely ended up being my favorite game of the year, and I'm so glad it wasn't a disappointment. It could have so easily been disappointing for me because my expectations were way too high. I'll fully admit that. So I'm glad that it ended up being as great as it is. And yeah, my favorite game of 2017, Persona 5.
Just a single cup of joe. So, you're the guy.
Anyways, guys, there you have it. That's my top 10 games of 2017. Now let's get into the honorable mentions first. So the games that almost made the top 10 and would have made a top 20. Danganronpa version 3. I really enjoyed that game. It's got one of the best endings to a game this year. I do think it dragged a lot. Like, the pacing was pretty off in that game, and I know a lot of it I found kind of dull. I think a lot of the cases weren't quite as strong as in previous games. It's got a great cast of characters, though, that's for sure. I really love a lot of the characters in that game, but I don't know, I looked at it and I was like, yeah, the pacing and just how dull that game was at times kind of dragged it down a little bit for me. If the cases were as consistently strong as they were in the first two Danganronpa games, then it would have a good chance of making my Game of the Year list. But that was very close. Like, that would have been like 11 or 12 for me. And the ending is just, I mean, it's controversial, but personally, I really loved it. I thought it was really cool. Resident Evil 7, a nice return to form for the series. I played that actually very recently. I think it kind of falls apart towards the end a little bit as soon as you leave the mansion, but I really did enjoy that game. I think it's a good direction for the series to go in. Getting back to the horror roots with like the inventory management and things like that. Definitely one of the better games of the year, I think, and a nice surprise from Capcom. These two games are the games that I think people are going to be like, what? How did these games not make your top 10? Because they're going to be in a lot of other people's top 10s. Yakuza 0. I really did enjoy it. You guys saw my review. I did like the game. The side quests in Yakuza 0 are awesome, and the main story is actually quite good too. But I don't know. I'm getting burnt out on the Yakuza games. I gotta say, I enjoy the series. I think it's just a little too much for me right now. It's not the type of game where I can play one right after the other. I need a nice break, like a good year or two break between games. I feel like I've just played too many of them in such a short span of time that the combat in that game got a little old for me pretty quickly, and I don't know, it was a bit of a struggle for me to get through it at times, I gotta say. So it ultimately didn't quite make the top 10, but if that's your first Yakuza game, I think you're going to be really impressed by it, and it's probably going to make your top 10. But for me, that's someone that's played the Yakuza games, like almost every single one of them. In fact, I have played every single one of them, except for like Dead Souls. But yeah, whatever. No one likes that game. But yeah, not not quite to make the top 10, but definitely in my top 20. And then the other one is Neo. This is the one that a lot of people just love, and I enjoy the game. It's a good game. I'm not as high on that game as everyone else is. The combat is amazing. Don't get me wrong. The combat is fantastic. It's got so much depth to it, and just all the different weapon types, and just like the pacing of it. But everything else about that game, when you compare it to like a Souls game, is just lacking for me. The level design it's not bad, but it's not great either. A lot of those levels are kind of like uninteresting to explore. The loot system I hate in that game. I think it causes way too much menu tinkering, and it's just a bunch of useless garbage that you're constantly picking up, and I hate that. I think it's just absolutely way too much. Like the story and just like the lore behind it is just utter rubbish to me. Like it's just, ugh, I hate all of that part of the game. The mission structure to the game, I just don't like compared to like an open world or even like a more linear world like Dark Souls 3 even, I much prefer. It just doesn't have that sense of mystery and atmosphere that a Souls game would have, and it's just there's some systems in there that I didn't care for all that much. It's just, I don't know, like the combat's great, everything else around it I just was kind of like, not really for me. So the game ultimately ended up being a little underwhelming overall, despite enjoying it, mostly due to that combat. Because it was really the only combat I loved about that game, I just felt like it didn't really have a place in the top 10. Top 20 for sure, though. I do like that game. I think it's one of Team Ninja's best games in years, that's for sure. But what else? Night in the Woods, a nice little visual novel type game, which with a lot of relatable characters. It was a little dull at times, and there's like these weird platforming dream sequences that I absolutely hated. But that game's a nice narrative-driven game that people should check out. What else? Ukulele. Everyone hates Ukulele. I liked it. Mario Odyssey completely blows it out of the water, and it actually made me look back on Ukulele and be like, oh, okay, maybe that game has got a lot of issues. But I don't know, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for the most part. I had fun with it. It's not perfect. I can definitely see why people hate it, but I don't know if I would recommend it, especially when something like Odyssey exists, and A Hat in Time even, which we'll get to that game. But yeah, I didn't hate it. Prey, I really do admire a lot about Prey. It's an immersive sim. It's the type of game we don't get too much anymore, and it really feels a lot more like System Shock 2 than the BioShock games have. But it really falls apart towards the end with like annoying respawning enemies. The story falls apart. The intriguing setup that they had in the beginning just falls apart. It's a shame because that game could have been top 10 material for me if it stayed strong throughout. But it lost me towards the end. I ultimately ended up thinking it was just okay in the end. That game was disappointing in a lot of ways actually. But I think it's interesting enough, and there's just a lot of great ideas in that game, and it's got a lot of great RPG elements to it as well that I don't know, I feel like it could still maybe make my like a top 20, maybe at like 20 at the very bottom. Final Fantasy 12 and Crash Insane Trilogy are the kind of games that I can't include on a list because technically they're not 2017 games, but I thought were both really well done remasters. Final Fantasy 12 especially, I loved. It ends up being like my second favorite Final Fantasy game. That's how much I enjoyed it. I got super into the optional content in the game. I like did everything there is to do in that game, which is so rare for me, especially in not JRPGs, but RPGs in general. So yeah, I was pretty obsessed with that game. If I like had my, if I could include a game like that in the top 10, it would have made it like probably number 5 or 6 or something like that. Final Fantasy 12 is fantastic. Crash Trilogy, I love Crash 2 and 3. Crash 1 was very frustrating. It was the hardest game I've played this year. Honestly, I think it's got like Cuphead has nothing on the first Crash game. But Crash 1 is far more frustrating than Cuphead. It's a lot less forgiving. and it's a lot more cheap, I think. But it was still a memorable experience for me. I had a fun time streaming the original Crash, but I did enjoy that trilogy quite a bit. Destiny 2 is one of the games I put the most amount of hours into. Like a lot of time spent playing with my friends on that game, but let's be honest, Destiny 2 is not a great game. Like, is it really not? It's just a fun game to play with friends. I thought I would mention it here. Wolfenstein 2, I really loved a lot of the directions that story went in. Like, that game is fucking insane. But a lot of issues with the gameplay, just that reinforcement system being absolute trash, the level design being quite poor, but that game has some really memorable moments to it. But yeah, that's about it for honorable mentions. We'll do games I missed here. More than I thought. More games I would have liked to play, but just didn't have the time for them. Gravity Rush 2. I really did love the first game. Just for whatever reason, I just didn't get around to the second game. But I feel like Gravity Rush I played not that long ago, and I looked at Gravity Rush 2 and I was like, I don't know if I'm in the mood for more of that at the moment. I think that's why I put it off. And I ended up putting it off for the whole year. There was just so much other stuff to play. So I don't know. Maybe that game would have surprised me, but I know of a few people that didn't like it compared to the first game. Apparently it got, like, it's way too long compared to the first game, and the story kind of gets in the way, and it's apparently not very good, but I don't know, we'll see. I'll definitely play that game eventually. Hat in Time is one of the big ones. It came out at a bad time for me. Apparently it's a really great, like, throwback to, retro 3D platformers, and it's apparently a hell of a lot better than Yooka-Laylee. But it came out at around the same time as Mario Odyssey, and it's one of those games I look at it, I'm just like, there's no fucking way it's better than a Mario Odyssey. I don't know. Maybe I'm being too hard on it. Maybe I would be surprised by it. I don't know. I feel like of all the games, that's the one that I really should have played. Apparently it's not that long either, but yeah, I just didn't quite have the time for it. Divinity Original Sin 2 apparently is one of the best games of the year. I love me a good computer RPG, but that game is like 100 hours long. It came out at a really bad time, really late in the year when I was playing a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, there's just no time for a 100-hour game like that. I would have rather played Xenoblade 2 because I was really excited for that game. So yeah, that's one of those games I missed out on, and it seems to be a game that's overlooked this year. I don't think a lot of people played it, again, because it's one of those PC-only games. Like, I feel like a lot of people don't play those games. Thimbleweed Park is another one, a throwback to, like, old-school point-and-click adventure games. I'm a bit iffy on that one. I really like the concept behind it, but it looks like it has a lot of those obtuse puzzles from the old days, which I fucking hate. So, I don't know. I feel like I might be mixed on that game overall. Maybe I'll watch, like, a Let's Play or something of it. I feel like I would more enjoy that game that way. Hellblade. Apparently that game was quite good. I've never been a huge fan of Ninja Theory's games, and I think that's what kind of put me off not playing it. But apparently it's good, and the way it tackles, like, mental health is well done. But the gameplay in that game looks kind of, I don't know, it looks mediocre. I don't know, the combat in that game looks pretty uninteresting to me. And I don't know, Ninja Theory I've just not been a huge fan of. Like, Enslaved is one of those games that, like, everyone fucking loves. I don't get why people love that game so much. I will never understand it. But Hellblade, I would have liked to have maybe tried that game out. Sonic Mania, a lot of people are going to put this on their top 10. I've never been a Sonic fan. I've hated the 2D games. I hate the 3D games. So that's why I didn't get to playing that one. But a part of me is like, maybe give that game a chance. Maybe I would like that. I am going to play one of these games. I'm going to give it a shot. I have a feeling that maybe that game will turn me around on Sonic, especially 2D Sonic, and maybe I'll finally understand what people love about it so much. But yeah, I didn't quite get around to that because I wasn't entirely sure I was going to like it. Golf Story was apparently a really great game on the Switch. I don't mind golf games, actually. I don't mind them every once in a while, and that game's got RPG elements because it's like inspired by the old Mario Golf games on like Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance, which had like leveling up your characters and things like that. So you know what? I do wish I would have played Gulf Story. That game looks really charming. I love the visual style to it. That game might have had a chance of making the list. I do wish I played that. The Sexy Brutale, that game looks kind of interesting. It's a puzzle game, which I kind of don't like puzzle games, and that's, I think, what put me off of that one. But it's got a hell of a concept and premise to it. Very unique. That game is one of the more unique games of this year. I do wish I would have given it a bit of a chance. Cosmic Star Heroine is apparently this nice retro throwback to JRPGs, but with a lot of modern design, especially with regards to its battle system and the way it handles random encounters. Apparently that game's quite good. I've heard from a lot of people that it's a really great game. And it looks like the type of game I would love. I mean, anything inspired by Chrono Trigger is going to get me interested, but for whatever reason, I just didn't get around to playing it for some reason, which I don't know why. I can't really say why. What Remains of Edith Finch is apparently a really excellent narrative game. It's making a lot of Game of the Year lists. It's, I don't know. I looked at it. It's, I don't know. It's got like supernatural elements to it that I don't like that much. I've never been a big fan of supernatural elements in anything, whether it be movies, games. Well, games it's a little tough to get away from, so I don't mind it as much in games. So I don't know, maybe I would like Edith Finch, but I don't know, something about that game just puts me off. I don't know, something tells me I wouldn't like it, but I don't know, maybe I should still give it a chance. ARMS is a Switch game I would have liked to play, but I'm not paying fucking $70-$80 for that game, sorry. Like, it looks fun, but I'd pay $20 at most. At the prices going for in Canada, no way. That's the type of game I would play for like a day or two at most, and be done with it. So, yeah, never did play ARMS. Pyre is apparently really good. It's interesting. It's like a mix of like a sports game and like a narrative choice game, and then an RPG, I guess. By Supergiant Games, known for Bastion and Transistor. A lot of people love that game. It looks so unappealing to me. I don't know. A lot of people are saying still give it a chance. You know, it's a sports game, or it's got elements of a sports game, but you'd be surprised. You might still like it, but I don't know, man. It's such a tough sell for me. Anything sports is just like an immediate like get it away from me. Type of thing, but maybe I should still give that game a shot. I don't know, but unfortunately it did kind of put me off. I know, I look at the gameplay and it just does not look fun to me. It just does not look fun whatsoever. I just have like this 90% chance feeling that I won't like it. Doki Doki Literature Club is apparently absolutely insane, and not what you would think it is. It seems like one of those really like cliched Japanese dating games, but apparently it's much more than that. It's free, so I don't really have a good excuse for not playing that one. I guess just didn't have the time, even though it's apparently short as well. I don't know. That I don't know. And then finally Hob, which is apparently very much inspired by like the original Zelda. I've heard a lot of good things from a few of my a few people I know. Another one of those games I didn't get around to. There's just not enough time in the year. So yeah, that's a big list of games I missed out. Maybe potentially one of those games could have actually been in my top 10, but I didn't get around to them, unfortunately. And finally, disappointments, and then like the worst games I played this year. Not too many here, which is crazy. You know me, I'm very cynical and often complain about a lot of different games. Fire Emblem Echoes, that's one of the biggest disappointments for me as someone that's recently really gotten into the Fire Emblem games. Those enemy types, I forget what you call them, the ones that constantly respawn enemies, fuck that shit. Ruined the game. It's amazing that it's such a simple thing in a game, such a simple idea, a unit that endlessly respawns other enemies, and is almost impossible to get to. It makes the maps go on for like an hour longer than they should. It just is a game breaker for me. An absolute game breaker. I wasn't able to finish that game. I just hated that so much. Evil Within 2, this one, I should have played it more. For whatever reason, like, the first open world section of that game just pissed me off. Like, I hated it so much. Like, just, I don't know, it did not work for me. I don't know, for whatever reason, I just got really annoyed by it and just dropped the game, and gave it back to my friend that I borrowed it from. Like, a lot of people really praising Evil Within 2, apparently it's actually really damn good. I don't know, I feel like I was being kind of stupid with that one, so I even, like, was angry on Twitter. I was like, this is one of the most disappointing games I've played, this is one of the worst games I've played this year. That's unfair. I didn't put enough time into it. I literally put, like, maybe a couple hours into it, so I can't really call that a disappointment or worse. That's one of my regrets. I think I was being way too picky or something. I don't know, I think I was just in a bad mood at the time. And I think maybe I wanted to be playing something else. And then it reminded me of The Last of Us. I don't know what it was. It was just the way the combat felt. Just reminded me of The Last of Us. And I hate the combat in The Last of Us. I know that's, like, blasphemous. I fucking hated the gameplay in The Last of Us. Like, it just drove me nuts. Like, the stealth horror gameplay. Maybe that's it. I don't like stealth games. I just don't. And it's just Evil Within 2, I felt like they really wanted you to be stealthy, like with The Last of Us, and it just drove me insane. But yeah, I'm being a little unfair, I think, with Evil Within 2. Ys 8, this is a weird one for me. A lot of people loved it. I liked it at first. I loved the first, like, 10 hours or so, but by, like, the 20-hour mark, I was sick of it. Like, I didn't want to play it anymore. Like, the combat's good, but I don't know, it started to drag, and just, like, the dungeons were starting to get really obnoxious. The story and characters did absolutely nothing for me, and that's probably, like, the localization's fault in a lot of ways, but I don't know, that game just didn't keep my interest. I just got really bored of it. Like, and then there's the fact that game's, like, fucking 50 hours long, which is just... I'm sorry, like, the Ys games are much better when they're short. I don't know if that's a controversial opinion or not, but I really preferred when the Ys games were, like, 10, 15 hours, like Ulfenfall Dagana, Ys Origin. I don't know, they're getting longer and longer with each game, and I'm just not into that. Like, I don't know. Ys 8 just didn't do it for me for some reason. South Park Fractured Butthole I thought was pretty disappointing. I didn't think it was anywhere near as good as the first game. Way too much fart humor. The battle system was a step up, but the actual humor behind it was nowhere near as good. It repeated a lot of the same stuff you saw in the first game. Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was kind of underwhelming. It was fun, but I don't know. Yeah, I like the Stick of Truth was like a Game of the Year list game for me when it came out of that year. And yeah, this game didn't even come close to that. Mario Rabbids, that's one of those games I was excited for, and just, I found it to be boring. I got to, like, the beginning of the third world, and I'd had enough. I wasn't finding it enjoyable anymore. I don't know what it is with that game. There's, like, a lot of tactical depth to it. I should like that game. It just, well, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's maybe the Rabbids part of it just is so uninteresting to me. And just the fact that other than the tactical battles, everything else about that game sucks. That might be it. But yeah, that's one of those games that got a lot of praise that I really didn't care for, honestly. I dropped it. And then finally, yeah, that's about it for, like, the disappointing games. But I did play Assassin's Creed Origins. That's the worst game I played this year. That game fucking blows. It got good reviews for some reason. Like that game is like everything I hate in video games. This massive open world with all this shit all over the map, all of it uninteresting, half-baked RPG elements. Where if you're underleveled by just a bit, the main missions, like the enemies, will just absolutely demolish you. It looks great. I love the setting. Like, it's really cool, but it's filled with so much uninteresting shit. The combat is not very good. You know, they try some different things with it compared to previous games, but I still don't think it's very good. It's got all the animus garbage that, you know, that's always been terrible about Assassin's Creed. The writing is horrendous from what I saw. I feel bad because a friend basically bought that game for me, but I thought that was a miserable experience. Like, it's just open world bloat, and it takes everything from all these other games and just, it's nowhere near as good as any of these games it's borrowing from. And it's especially eye-opening playing it after Breath of the Wild. Like, guys, like open world games, you guys have to do better now. You got to step your game up. Breath of the Wild is out now, and like, it's just, Assassin's Creed felt like this like game from like 2 years ago. I hated Assassin's Creed Origins. Like, I've always hated Assassin's Creed, but I haven't played Assassin's Creed games since like Brotherhood, actually. Playing this, it just brought it all back for me. Why I hate that series so much. Just the annualization of it. It's like everything I hate about the gaming industry distilled into one game. This disgusting, like, I don't know. There's my Assassin's Creed rant. I'm sorry if some people actually like that game, but I don't know. To me, it's just like, ugh. It just represents everything wrong with the gaming industry right now. It's just everything at its worst. But anyways, that's it, guys. I want to thank you for watching. What were some of your favorite games of the year? What were some like disappointments for you? What were some games you missed that you wanted to play? If you've got a video or something like that, definitely let me know. I'll definitely check it out. Feel free to leave your own top 10s in the comments. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.